Wow, we
They're pretty
really are
spread
far
apart.
away from each other here.
All right.
Hello, my name is Jay Weinstein. I am a fellow of Avasant. We are thrilled to be in the big room. The cybersecurity team is never in the big room. We usually are at the kids' table, which is out back, but this time we got to go into the big room. So, cybersecurity has always been, the past 20 or so years, the forefront of everything that we do with respect to securing certainly critical infrastructure. But the past few years, with the advent of AI, things have changed a lot. Yesterday, we had an innovation workshop for aerospace and defense to talk about, business innovation, things like that, and it seemed like half of our conversation was all about cybersecurity. We can't get away from cybersecurity and governance, and now AI and the implications of AI. Earlier today, you saw Todd Inlander of Southern California Edison. He's up here talking about nation-state adversaries taking down his electrical grid. I mean, these were things that were usually only discussed in the aerospace and defense world, and now here are all critical infrastructures talking about it. So with me today, we have a group of an esteemed panel. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask each of them to, when they're done, also add in their favorite sports team. Manju?
All right. Manju Naglapur. I'm from Unisys. I'm the global BU head for a BU called CA&I. I know it's a mouthful. It's Cloud Applications and Infrastructure. It's a global role, and it's around 40% of Unisys' revenue. If you think about infrastructure, cloud, digital, which data and applications and cybersecurity, it falls under my remit. And my favorite team, unfortunately, is Commanders, Washington Commanders. I used to be a huge Giants fan, but for the past 25 years, I've been suffering. So.
That's awesome. John Carruthers. I retired from the FBI about 5 years ago. Was in the FBI for 27 years. It was shortly after my retirement that I joined Avasant as a distinguished fellow. Since then, I've had a couple of vendor-centric jobs, right, where I'm focused on cybersecurity. And about 2 months ago, I joined CVS Health as a business information security officer. So in a way, I kind of traded my gun and badge for a red heart-shaped lapel pen, which has been awesome. Favorite sports team, it kind of depends on the season. Very happy to hear the Commanders, because that's probably my #1 team. Right now, Golden State Warriors, San Diego Padres, Washington Capitals, and then the Commanders. So it's good to be here.
Awesome. Hello, I'm Alexandra Landegger. I lead global cyber strategy at RTX. Last time I was at this conference, I spoke to you all as the Collins CISO, but about 6 months ago, moved up to the parent company, RTX, largest aerospace and defense business in the world, consisting of Collins, Raytheon, Pratt & Whitney. So really excited to sort of expand the scope and hit a wider business here. My favorite sports team, I'm going to cheat and give two as well. One is one you've heard of, the Washington Nationals, and the second is one you've probably not heard of, my local hockey team, the Sun Valley Suns. I live in a ski mountain town, and it's a bunch of former NHL and D1 players, and it is the most fun thing to watch a bunch of 40-year-olds go at it on the ice.
I'm George Mansour. I'm the Chief Information Systems Officer at the California State University System. We are the 23 public universities of the state university system. We are the largest 4-year university system. We graduate 1 in 3 Californians, 1 in 10 Americans with degrees. And my favorite sports team, I'm a born and raised Angelino, so I'm going to stick on the football theme and go with the Rams.
So I am a selfish person. And the reason I asked that question, I am 40 years in aerospace and defense. My background is everywhere from engineering into IT, past 20 or so years in cybersecurity, most of it as a CISO for L3. I'm a born and raised Philadelphian, so I am the proud fan of the world champion Philadelphia Eagles. So I apologize, but it was a selfish question. Yeah, all you Dallas fans, go ahead. You can come up to me afterwards. We call them cockroaches. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so we're going to get right into this. And we've done a lot of talking about cybersecurity and even nation-state actors in the critical infrastructure and things like that. Well, with AI, we are using AI in cyber defense and lots of things from a cyber perspective in AI. And we have to protect AI, and we're going to talk a lot about that.
What AI and the existence of this, we're going to talk about it later, but the existence of this technology has allowed them to do it more efficiently and at greater scale, right? And so when you think about the world that we operate in a business sense today, the amount of data that we have just organically to what we do, it's very difficult to keep up on the defender, right, on the blue team aspect of this equation, because the red team, basically the attack threatscape is so vast, extremely difficult. And then we can, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, right, AI and security tooling. But yeah, we've talked a lot about already, like that surface level use of the adversary or by the adversary, like deep fake, social engineering efficiency. But there's even a more devious use case, right, that can be applied here, and that would be the adversary getting into our AI models and changing, right, the effectiveness or the integrity of the data that we're using in our AI model. But that could be a whole separate panel.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about securing AI in a second, but let's go back to what you were just talking about with the product. So we have layers of defense, network layers, network systems, data. We have every layer of defense that you could imagine. We don't eliminate layers of defense. And what are you seeing in some of the tools and how AI is impacting a lot of the tooling that we're starting to use? And not necessarily saying we should buy new tooling, but our existing tooling should have an AI path.
Yeah, so I'll start. So earlier when we kicked off this amazing summit, Brian Solis stood up here and he talked about leaders not knowing what they don't know, right? And so kind of in that spirit, let's level set what AI is. AI is not smart automation, right? When we think of smart automation, we're thinking about rules-based automation, right? Where a tool is going to look at a set of rules, they're going to operate within those guardrails, and they're going to act accordingly based on a predetermined set of rules. AI, or LLM, right, large language model, is rule-based automation to the nuclear degree, right? It is super smart. It is able to analyze, research, and assess large amounts of language data and make decisions accordingly. So as long as we understand that that's what we're talking about up here, right, we're not talking about smart automation. So to your point, Jay, with security tooling and AI, right, and we're talking about just the standards, like what are we seeing with AI as it relates to standard security controls? Things like endpoint protection, data classification, network security, Security Operations Center, right, SOC. What we're seeing in those spaces with AI is mind-blowing, right? When I look back 3 years ago to this summit, I remember sitting in your seat and I was looking at the agenda. This is 3 years ago. Yeah, there we go, 3. Looking at the agenda, and I would describe AI back then as, because this was the summer of 2023, right? If everybody recalls, OpenAI came out in, what was it, November timeframe of 2022 with ChatGPT. And it was just disruptive tech by definition is what AI was in 23. Fast forward to this year, and Anupam said it really well on this stage right here a couple hours ago when he said it's systemic disruption. So in 2 or 3 years, we've gone from disruptive tech to where this is like, it's part of our system, right? We're disrupting the way we live our lives. And I got way off track. So any of my fellow panelists want to bring me back, I'm happy to have it happen. But.
Well, I think one great example of where AI has really been helpful to us, at the end of the day, it's a lot of the things that are more routine. So for example, for every one email that lands in my inbox, 9 have been blocked. Known spam, known phishing, known malicious actors sending things. Having that scale of people focused on that kind of a thing doesn't work. AI has actually taken that number from 7 to 9 for us in terms of blocked emails per one that gets through, because it understands and it leverages all of our threat intel feeds to naturally start making those decisions differently. SOC, as you were talking about, is another great spot where we've got millions of alerts triggering, and we've actually been able to bring down our costs, our number of people supporting these incidents, actually having to go through and do manual work here by about 30% simply through AI. And so now as a result, we are able to start getting more and more into some really sophisticated things around insider threats, user behavioral analytics, things that AI can't detect is unexpected behavior, because when somebody logs in with an actual real password and it didn't take them 500 attempts, they haven't exactly figured out that that's a bad thing yet. And so having humans be able to focus on those types of much more nuanced actions has been really powerful.
When you're reducing by 30%, you're not letting people go. As a matter of fact, we have such a shortage of cyber people that we're able to take those existing people and train them and get them more advanced to do to the things that the lower levels.
Like Brian said this morning, we had that, he kind of brought that up, right? Is AI replacing the human? And no, I mean, yes, in some cases it is, and that's a bad decision, right? He biasedly says as a human. But AI needs to be the accelerator for capability.
Yeah, I think in two aspects, like you talked about product tooling from endpoint network, right? But the scope of CISOs itself is changing nonstop. And I think the CISO, if you look at that office, I mean, they operate in a shared responsibility model. They're reliant on the lines of businesses, on central IT for everything, right? Now you add, like if I look at AI as a vector, right? You have AI-first solutions, and then there is infusion of AI into all the solution offerings that you're using as an enterprise, right? Like I know there's a major tool sprawl that's going on, but even if you look at AI-first principles, in terms of look at how you need to start reducing the perimeter of everything that you're doing. When you're looking at AI first, the first thing you need to do is in terms of how do you create those AI firewalls? Because I think that's a big thing that's going on, and contextually, everybody's trying to limit it as much as they can for a particular use case because the landscape is pretty wide, right? So here we got to start CISOs have to work very well together with the data scientists to kind of say what's inbound, what's outbound, is it linked to my RBAC, right? So I think role-based access control. So those are the kinds that are also going on in the AI first models today.
George, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's allowing an opportunity for those CISOs to go out into those lines of businesses and help them with some of the challenges that they have. I think it's eliminating some of that other work that we've done that we've needed to do in the past. One of our big problems, every year we get several million applications. Sifting through those applications to find those fraudulent applications is time consuming, labor consuming, and there's a lot of gaps in that process. We're able to go out there and start to help narrow those gaps. The ability to detect those anomalies at scale is allowing us to reduce the volume of those fraudulent applications that just kind of create noise in the system and exposure in our financial aid processes.
So to finalize this part of the question, I'll tell you that as a CISO, I have gone out to every single one of my security providers and security tool people, and I've asked them for their roadmap, and I want to see AI on their roadmap. And not only do I want to see it, I refuse to pay for it. If they want to keep my business for that product, they're going to have to put in this new capability just to keep up. and they better not be charging me extra, or else I'll start looking for somebody else.
Charge you extra for the inclusion of AI?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, if I'm using CrowdStrike
Right.
better have a roadmap
Oh, yeah.
that evolves their
Yeah.
AI capability, and I'm not going to pay extra
Yeah.
just to get the AI
Yeah,
capability.
you
Better
at least want to know it's part of the conversation.
Yes.
Right? Like there's a whole separate discussion, which we're probably going to get into, on how to govern the use of AI. Right? But-
John, you're like
Well,
throwing
you know, I'm
these
kind of
softballs
a
up.
little
So I
bit
think one answer that I want to give here, right? If you look at even going beyond AI, even if you look at PQC, that's also coming down the pike. If you look at hardware vendors, if you don't have chips or if you don't even have updatable firmware, I mean, even there is like a big cost that you as a CTO is also like looking at. Like I think there's like a 180 degree or 360 degree within the enterprise that you need to look at all these aspects when you're looking at the future, I would say, threat landscape, right? I think there's real cost implications.
So for my cyber products, I expect AI to be embedded in and as part of their costs and the evolution of making their product better. But to what you were just saying, John, we know that our internal customers, our enterprises, are implementing AI. And I always say that AI has been around for 20 years or more. What's new is the accessibility to it, the LLM, the fact that employees can get it. Same thing happened with the internet. The internet was invented in the 50s, but until browsers got on everybody's personal computers, nobody cared about cybersecurity about it. Well, the same thing is happening now with AI. And it's just faster, better, stronger, and more accessible. So, Alexandra, I know you and your business is doing some really unique things to try and, I'll say, govern, control, and secure your internal AI. Why don't you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So I think the most effective thing I've seen within our company is standing up an AI council that is co-sponsored by the head of engineering, head of operations, head of digital, head of legal. You need those 4 organizations or whatever equivalent within your companies to come together and own the mission, because there is no single owner of AI. So we as digital need to partner with legal to figure out what are the guardrails we need to put in place, so that way, as we've got our sort of citizen developers out there building new things, building new products, how do we enable them to do so in a way that is naturally compliant, naturally secure? It's hard to do the wrong thing. We need to have the engineering and operations mindset in the room as well to understand what are the potential avenues where we can really leverage AI to deliver better product services to our customers. And so cohesively coming together as one leadership team, building, there's sort of tiers within that council, right? It's super senior executives coming in together, owning that overall story, but then having working groups within that at various layers all the way into our sub-business units, really driving the one voice, but understanding bottom up and top down, how do we consistently drive the right requirements, the right needs, the right questions, and really become the true business enabler that digital can be here.
Now, John, are you seeing the same thing as the BISO?
Yeah.
And you can explain what a BISO is, because it's a new role that's popped up in the past year or so. And you can explain that to everybody.
Yeah. I've been here for 3 hours, and I've explained the BISO title about 18 times. And every time it's a different definition. But yeah, for CVS Health, first of all, massively huge organization. Been around for approximately 100 years. And during that time, countless mergers and acquisitions, right? Think about things like Aetna, right? We acquired Aetna like 6-7 years ago, so like that was a huge organization in and of itself. So when I digress, big organization, multiple towers, right? Different business units. Think about retail, Caremark, insurance with Aetna, home care. So all these different towers. Each of those towers needs a security voice, right? Somebody that's going to communicate or really not only communicate security, but de-escalate incidents between those towers and between all the different stakeholders, like the executives and then the practitioners within the organization. So I've been there for 2 months. When I was interviewing, the challenge that was presented to me, that was going to be my biggest, they said it's going to take 8 months to learn the organization. I think that was probably conservative. Doing pretty good, but got a little ways to go. Can I just double down on Alexandra? First of all, you sounded very much like an executive, like you've recently been hired by a parent company.
Former consultant,
Or promoted. So yeah, absolutely the governance, the GRC piece of AI requires its own attention, its special conversation. But you still have the security, right? How are we securing the AI models? And Jay, we've talked about, within the panel, Patrick Opet, right? Mm-hmm. CISO for JP Morgan, perfect timing, wrote a letter right before RSA, right, a couple weeks ago. And in his letter, he pleaded with industry to please, let's focus on security by design, secure by design, when not just talking about AI models, but really all of security. This is a conversation that we've been having for years.
Yeah, he's worried even just how we connect to software as a service providers, and we're just doing, SAML, NOAuth, and that if that gets compromised, you're bringing down the entire framework and infrastructure of every business out there, and it's all relying on one capability.
So now we're dealing with, we could scope this up or scale it up to a supply chain discussion, but truly it was like a chef's kiss, this letter, and proof that not all heroes wear capes, right?
And this is exactly, to me, the letter almost summed up why the BISO role is so important.
Yeah, well, yes.
Because having a cyber-minded person sit on the SLT of every one of your business units to understand, be embedded in the business, be a voice of the business that then comes back into cyber and says, here's the reality of how things are working. Here's what we need to deliver as cyber to make it easier to actually do things securely and compliantly. And in reverse, making sure that you're pushing the cyber messages out into your business in a way that's consumable, making sure that the priorities are actually understood the right way in both sides of that equation.
And when you get a solution that has AI in it, it's important that we push back and investigate the governance and the security involved around that to make sure your data doesn't get publicly done. We were talking yesterday with Dave from General Atomics, and he brought in all of his AI internally. Isn't using it's just all private AI, and is doing it that way, and he's putting in his own governance around that. Others are using Copilot, but even Copilot has to be configured right. So you have to be really careful when you're doing your AI implementations that you build that security and governance around it.
I think, we could do that, but understand all the models. Like you have frontier models, you have open source models, and I think, in this case, in this particular use case, we see a lot more when it's in the POC stage, when you're doing all these AI first, applications. It works great because you're just doing 1 or 2 clicks in terms of a use case. Now, when you start going at scale is when you feel like private AI is not a bad alternative because you have a lot more, I would say, command in terms of how you can set up your perimeter, right? And we are seeing that more and more, even when they're doing like sovereign clouds. They're bringing in these AI factories and kind of making it a lot more.
When you bring it in, you get to assign your governance to it. And you don't don't have to worry about the external things. George, is he doing something similar?
Yeah, we're slightly different. In the university setting, we're kind of open. So we're finding, they're going to use it. Our students, our faculty, our staff, they're going to use these tools whether or not we say yes or no. So we feel like we need to provide those tools and provide that safe framework and safe guardrails. So that's kind of where we are right now. our folks are very out there. They're using these tools, doing a lot of research in this areas, and yet they're also naturally suspicious, which is kind of a good thing. We're concerned about developing systems that make decisions of consequence. Particularly, we see there's opportunities, perhaps in student advising, counseling, those areas where we could use AI. We're pulling back a little bit until we can understand that a little bit better. But going back, providing those tools with the right level of guardrails so that we can ensure that they have a safe place, a secure place, a place where data privacy concerns, because everyone forgets about that layer, right? Can be managed and protected, and they can go out there and leverage those capabilities.
Excellent. So for the last topic, we have about 4 minutes left. If you guys don't know, you realize there's a big clock that sits in front of us, and it's going to start flashing, and
It's now
the hand's going to come out and slap
It's now
us.
3:40.
Yeah, down to 3:40. I'm wasting time. I want to give each person a minute to finish up and talk about some of new technologies, new concerns. You just mentioned privacy, George. So why don't you start and talk about other things, quantum, IT, OT, all the things that we've talked about. Why don't you give us some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so our big concern right now, we're a data-rich environment, and we have a lot of data, a lot of interesting data, and a lot of people. We're just, how do we put those right guardrails around that data to ensure that we're working with that data in an ethical way? That we are starting to touch on certain areas where, frankly, to me even, it's kind of creepy, right? And we need to understand that better before we move on.
Yeah, so just to queue up panel topics for next year, I think 1, we could look at product security, 2, operational security, factories, labs, 3, I think really looking at data governance is so huge right now. Absolutely pivotal to a variety of topics. And the 4th one, certainly looking at quantum, post-quantum cryptography, et cetera.
John?
Yep, I would say one thing that we need to all think about when we talk about AI, just understand that we're not talking about ChatGPT or Perplexity or Anthropic. AI is everything, right? We've been talking about the tools. AI is embedded in our security tool stack. So it's not just one layer. It's literally everything that we do in business. And I think that's really important for us to kind of keep in mind as we work through this, discussion. It's going to be going on for years. It's part of our deal.
To me, as a system integrator, we are looking at a lot of the sovereignty that's going on with data and cloud. I think the contracts, in terms of setting up, in terms of the GDPR to multi-state laws, I think that's becoming very important. I think we are sitting in even talks where we have to negotiate worst-case scenarios. The insurance in terms of limited liability, and cyber insurance, they just keep propping up, and we got to come up with some airtight in a contractual language. I think as an SI, I would think that's table stakes. And now when we start looking at PQC, I think it's good to start looking into even it's just down the horizon. You're seeing even the hyperscalers coming up with newer chips every day, right? How do you start taking care of that perimeter is very important. How do you start looking right from the firmware level to the software? I think that's an important one for us, and we're looking into a lot of the consulting chops for PQC. That's number 2. In terms of AI first solutions, we got to talk about everything that we talked about here on the stage in terms of how do we start looking at data classification. What are the, I would say, rules of the road for making sure we are exposing the right data? How are we using the training models, and how are we validating the models is very important for us.
I think that's a good point. I think AI is definitely going to help identify the data and data classification within our businesses over the next few years. And as cyber professionals, that's critical for us to take action on something. We are not the ones responsible for identifying what that data is. And as AI helps the business do that, that's definitely going to help us. A couple takeaways that I want you to have. One of the things that we promised with this panel is that we were going to give you some solutions to things. So I want you to take back and go back to all your security providers and push them for their AI roadmap. Make sure they're putting things in place to protect your data. Make sure that those guardrails are up. I want you to, when you're looking at AI in your business, if you can bring it in-house, sometimes the easy answer is the best answer. Don't be afraid to do that. If you can afford Microsoft Copilot or some of those other things, that have the built-in security and you get the framework around it, that's great. And the last thing I want to take you away with is CISOs and the cybersecurity team should not be saying no to the business. We need to securely enable the business moving forward. So find a way to securely enable the business, get involved in the business, like this panel has talked about, and the things that they're doing to stay involved in the business. Get involved in your business so that you can securely enable moving them forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Applause, please. Again, they were fantastic.